Hi, Paul Slackis, Good News Broadcast. Speaking to Bob DeMarco. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Great. How are you doing today?
Okay, real well. Bob oversees Alzheimer'sReadingRoom.com, a former Wall Street executive, and we're going to be talking about Alzheimer's here. And we are speaking also to Dr. Mark Brody. Hi, Doctor. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. A neurologist and national recognized expert in Alzheimer's disease management and research, and you specialize in memory disorders. Okay, very good. Thank you guys for coming out and talking about this. So, shares his tips for success, Bob DeMarco. Okay, what does that mean?
I often get asked, from other Alzheimer's caregivers, what I'm doing and why we're so fortunate. And that's really 5 tips. The first one is I encourage all caregivers to look into what is called combination therapy. That includes 2 Alzheimer's drugs, Aricept and Namenda. The research shows that combining the 2 drugs works better than no drug or 1 drug. And I can tell you from our experience, after my mother started on the combination, she became more engaged and her behavior improved. One of the most important things, and this is really necessary, is exercise. And I'd ask you to imagine me taking my mother, Dotty, into a gym for the first time when she was 87 years old. I drag her in there, and she comes out a different person.
Okay.
Third is simple, Mediterranean diet. You can find out more about that on the blog. You really need good nutrition. Makes a difference. You need to keep Alzheimer's patients socialized. One good way is to get them into adult daycare for Alzheimer's patients. But if that's not possible, you have to involve as many people as you can. Keep them around, keep them talking. And last, and this is rarely mentioned, it's important to keep people suffering from Alzheimer's in bright light. They like to sit around in a dark or dimly lit room, and this can put them into a bad mood. So keep them in the brightest light possible, both inside and out.
Okay, well, obviously you have some real positive thoughts here. Doctor, what is Alzheimer's?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a brain disease that's degenerative disease. It gets worse over time, and unfortunately right now, everybody who has Alzheimer's gets worse and everybody succumbs to the disease. It's a disease where abnormal proteins in the brain that usually just get recycled start to build up in clumps and deposit in the brain, and they're toxic to the brain, and as time goes on, there's more and more of these clumps, and more of the brain starts to degenerate and waste away.
Okay, so do we have solutions, or do we have just ways to deal with it?
Well, there is no cure. We do have 4 medications that are FDA approved that I was involved in some of the research that help slow down the disease and help with the symptoms. And Bob's mom was on 2 of those, as you mentioned, Aricept and Namenda, and we often use a combination of one of the first 3, Aricept or Exelon or Razodine, which some of your listeners will have heard about from the television ads, and Namenda, which has a different mechanism, and together they can help slow things down a little bit for a little while and help with behavior. And Bob's mom came to our research facility because there's a number of promising research studies that actually give hope for modifying the disease and hopefully stopping it in its tracks.
Now, one of the things that Bob said, if I understood that correctly, was in essence more light. Is that right, Bob? Did you say something in that regard?
Yes.
Because I did a series a long time ago, 82, called the Brain Series. It was 10 hours on the brain. And one of the things we did with somebody who was a winter depressive, okay, is that we put them, or the National Institute of Mental Health did it actually, and we showed with PET scans how there was change in the brain. So, doctor, is it good to live in a sunny climate?
Yeah, as long as there's no hurricanes here, we're really happy about living.
I got my aunt down there. So, well, what does it do to? What does light do to someone's brain?
Well, it's a good question. Well, I'm not sure in the context of Alzheimer's, anyone knows it. There is this seasonal affective disease that mood is affected by exposure to sunlight, and it may well be the same case in Alzheimer's patients. And it may be just the stimulation that sunlight gives. Whatever the explanation is, Bob and a number of other people have noticed this, and there's a number of observations that come from Bob and other caregivers that he's able to give advice, that things that don't come up from a normal medical point of view, helpful hints, strategies and tactics, and that's, I think, why Bob's site has become so popular.
Well, Paul, I'm an Alzheimer's caregiver. I'm not a doctor, but I am an observer. And I noticed first that my mother would like to sit around in dark or a dimly lit room. And afterwards, I noticed, like, for example, when we were sitting around in a doctor's office, there's lots of light while we were waiting for our appointment, and her mood seemed to improve. So what I do is every day I make sure I take her out into bright light. My observation is that this really helps with her behavior, something that all Alzheimer's caregivers are concerned with. She's just smiles more and she's more engaged, and if she's smiling and engaged, then she's not engaging in any mean-spirited behavior. So I suggest people to try it. But we do go into bright light, even if we have to go into a store like Walmart every day.
Good news. Sounds great. So what's on the reading room?
What was that?
What's on the reading room? I'm looking at it right now. I see Katie Couric is on.
She asked a writer of a new book a question that they asked me to submit yesterday. The Alzheimer's reading room, is all about Alzheimer's disease and dementia. It's focused at Alzheimer's caregiver, so we provide lots of positives via the comments and reader interaction. It's very positive. I don't really go with the negative. And it's evolved really into a site that Alzheimer's caregivers find, and it's really about the art. I consider Alzheimer's caregiving to be an art, and that's what this site is about.
Doctor, on his site, on Bob's site, he has something with Dr. Oz's Alzheimer's memory quiz. Do you think that, are there some kinds of quizzes that people can take to start to see if their Alzheimer's is at bay or it's getting worse? Is there things that people can do?
Well, there's sometimes brief surveys to detect whether there's an early problem, and I think that's what a lot of people have there. And are you forgetful? Do you lose your keys or misplace your wallet? The people around you have noticed that your behavior's changed. Are you having trouble doing the things you could always do before? Reconcile your bank book, pay your bills. Are you having trouble with directions while you're driving? The people around you say you're asking the same questions again or telling the same stories. These are a way for people to take a little inventory and say, you know what, that's me. Maybe I ought to get this checked out.
How about the two quickies? How about attitude? Some people say then you're seeing people for the first time. So they try to make a little joy or, with what's life has brought you. How about a good positive attitude and a good smile on your face?
It really helps. We, Bob and I are both exposed every day to people who were really ended up with a bad situation for both the person and the caregiver, and a positive attitude of how are we going to deal with this and how are we going to make it better and how are we going to really deal with what people can do and optimize that and grow and find some good there rather than concentrating on all the things the person now can't do. It makes a huge difference.
Excellent. What's good news for each one of you?
For me, when my mother wakes up with a smile on her face, that's good news for me.
Doc, what's good for you?
And for me, since I'm in the research field, there is some light at the tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, we've got some people that we got early and put in some of the new research studies, and they haven't changed one iota for the past 5.5 years. So this gives me hope, and that makes me happy.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. We'll link over to both of your websites, the doctors as well as Alzheimer'sReadingRoom.com. Thank you very much for coming out and doing this. Bob, you're a good son. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ron.
Bye-bye.